Good morning, everyone, and I would like to begin by chanting something. This is the refuge chant, which is a simple chant that just speaks in celebration of the practice and of our happiness on that path. There's a lot of bells in this chant. Incense perfumes the atmosphere. A lotus blooms and the Buddha appears. The world of suffering and discrimination is filled with the light of the rising sun. As the dust of fear and anxiety settle, with open heart, one pointed mind, I turn to the three jewels. The fully enlightened one, beautifully seated, peaceful and smiling, a living source of understanding and compassion, to the Buddha I go for refuge. The path of mindful living, leading to healing, joy and enlightenment, the way of peace to the Dharma I go for refuge. The loving and supportive community of practice, realizing harmony, awareness, and liberation, to the Sangha I go for refuge. I am aware that the three gems are within my heart. I vow to realize them, practicing mindful breathing and walking, looking deeply into things. I vow to understand living beings and their suffering, to cultivate compassion and loving kindness, to practice joy and equanimity. I vow to offer joy to one person in the morning, to help relieve the grief of one person in the afternoon, living simply and sanely with few possessions, keeping my body healthy. I vow to let go of all worries and anxiety in order to be light and free. I am aware that I owe so much to my parents, teachers, friends, and all beings. I vow to be worthy of their trust, to practice wholeheartedly, so that understanding and compassion will flower, helping living beings be free from their suffering. May the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha support my efforts. Dear friends, today I want to focus on one of the lines in that chant. So I vow to understand living beings and their suffering. Our understanding, as we've looked at in the model of the Eightfold Path, understanding our views are the foundation for our actions. Right view is the object, intention in our practice to cultivate right view, samadhi. Right view, to have an understanding of things which will enable us to think and speak and act and move in the world with understanding and compassion in a way that promotes the path of well-being. And as I said before, understanding is like a window in a way, a view. It's you can see what you can see. with your understanding. And you don't necessarily see everything, and you don't necessarily see the same thing as someone else. But understanding is dynamic. It changes a lot. All the time, really. Like out here on the prairie, if you imagine, like you're in a dip and then you slowly come to one of the gentle rise, and suddenly you realize that you have this full perspective in all directions. Big sky above you. It's different where I live. There's hills, and if I'm in the valley, then I have like 30% less sky, because I have the hills there. And but I can climb to the top of a hill, and climbing to the top of the hill have that, right? So our view and our understanding is something that's always evolving, always changing, and our hope is that we have a kind of understanding which nourishes the path of well-being. The practice really invites us in two ways to develop our understanding, and one is it's not passive. We've been talking about effort and middle way and like gentle effort, gentle will, right? Being present but not forcing something. So it's not passive, but there's an aspect of developing understanding which is very much like planting a seed. So if you take a seed and you would like to grow it, you find the soil that is the appropriate soil for that kind of plant. You might need to do a little research, right? Consult some friends who know a little more. Anyway, you get that soil. You wait for the right time of year when there is the appropriate amount of light, or you place it for the appropriate amount of shade. All these conditions you have to get in place. The warmth, the light, the moisture. You begin to water it. You've placed it in the ground. You've covered it up with the right amount of soil. You pressed your finger on top of it. You even may have offered a prayer and a wish that the plant grow beautifully healthy and strong, right? And all these conditions we put in place. But the seed grows by itself. We didn't do that, right? We assemble all the conditions, but when they're right, that seed wells up with life and energy, and out goes a root, up goes a shoot, right? And suddenly that plant is growing. And our understanding can be like that, right? Where it is going to open, it's going to reveal itself, it's going to be a part of our life because all the conditions are there that support it, and it can manifest. Yeah. And that's one way in which our practice supports our growing of our understanding. This kind of nourishment of understanding is built on previous generations' understandings of nourishment. Like you would consult your friend about what soil, what sun, what shade, what amount of warmth does the seed need. We have friends who have experimented with these things, family members in the sense of our spiritual family who have experimented with these things for many generations, and therefore we have a lot of resource to depend on. And for example, the mindfulness trainings are one example of that, right? They hold in them the insight and understanding of many generations of practitioners. And there's guidance there, like, right, how to hold yourself in a particular situation in order that, right? That's one of those conditions you're bringing into your life to nourish the possibility of your awakening. You're not going to make yourself wake up, but you're going to keep the conditions there. So if you're prone to scrolling through reels and reels of whatever you might have come across on your feed, or some algorithm is telling you that you really need to read more of, right? And you're just soaking in information and stories and all kinds of things. This is a kind of food for your consciousness. It may or may not be one of those conditions, right? And the mindfulness trainings invite us in a beautiful way to watch that, pay attention. What sort of behavior that I'm engaging in is nourishing this and what is not, and then to be the good gardener and to say, well, this seed of awakening in me, it doesn't do well with hours and hours of feeding myself bad news about the world. And so I should step back from that. It's like overwatering your plant and it's just drowned in there and it can't do anything, right? So we're building the conditions in our life for our awakened understanding to grow. And if we do well, it grows, right? It will grow. You will have all kinds of little insights, all sorts of little awakenings about the nature of this or the quality of that. And you'll be able to be a creative, build a creative expression, your own version of what a life of awakening can look like out of your understanding. And if it's truly understanding that's grown out of the practice, it will have in it interbeing and impermanence. It will have in it awareness of the shared experience that we're really having. It will undermine your individualistic tendency, your grasping and your craving. It will undermine those things. It will go underneath and say, you don't need to have that anymore because there's a different kind of nourishment. Tai would always say that when you practice mindfulness and concentration, generating insight, understanding, view, when you would practice these things, you want to have concentration on what? Right? So that your understanding will be carrying what? Right? And what we are doing here is concentrating on the careful, quiet observation of ourselves and the world around us from a place of mindfulness to discover the deep interweavings. Yeah. So we build the conditions for awakening to arise. That's one approach. Then there's a whole nother approach, which is not very different, but it's a little more active in terms of concepts and ideas. And this is what Tai called deep looking. Deep looking. And this is where you exercise the faculties of thinking and feeling, right? To enter into the experience of something deeply, but using a particular guideline. And that guideline is the teaching on impermanence, the teaching on interbeing or non-separation, in order to help your mind go towards awakening. Very specifically in the conceptual or thought realm. In our practice, when we're planting the seed and building the conditions, the first kind of developing understanding, right? We're putting all sorts of different conditions in place in our life, and a sense of awakening might arise in us, or some clear idea of awakening might arise in us. Here, in deep looking, we're actively cultivating a certain way of thinking and feeling. Now, you can't think and feel yourself into the ultimate dimension. It doesn't work, because any thought is an abstraction from reality. It's a making small of and grasping a hold of something which can't be grasped. But you can dance around the edges, right? You can prompt yourself to stay close, so that deeper sense of true home, of true self, of realization and awakening can be close, right? And something that is easier to open to. So when we practice deep looking, we might look at something like a flower as an object of meditation. And I recommend doing things like flowers, your cute cat, a beautiful apple, a smile on a baby, right? Very simple, sweet things are really wonderful ways to practice this skill. And you do that a lot so that when something difficult happens, you have the capacity ready, available. It's like having some money in your account, so when you get to the register to pay, the card actually works, right? And so you've got that already built up. So you take a flower, and you are going to look deeply into the flower as an object of meditation. You're going to exercise your thinking and feeling skills. And of course, it's helpful if we're practicing shamatha, stopping and calming, because the mind can race so fast through complex descriptions, and maybe you're a biologist or a botanist or a gardener and you know an awful lot about this flower, and your mind is just turning out all sorts of facts and interesting stories. And so it's really helpful to have shamatha practice, slowing down and calming. So we bring ourselves home. We establish the zone of mindfulness within ourselves. And then we extend it to include the flower. And we ask the flower, where have you come from? What are you made of? How have you come to be? And questions like that invite this certain way of thinking, right? Now we're looking for connections. We're looking for relationships. So we're starting towards interbeing. We're starting towards impermanence. How has one thing turned into another, right? So we take the flower up in that way, in that object, as an object of meditation. We ask those questions, and as an answer arises in our mind, it doesn't matter whether it's the right one or not, they can all be right. We give it space. So perhaps, as is often the case when you think about something like a flower, flowers and sun have a very important relationship. So you might say, you flower, you have come to be in a deep and beautiful relationship with the sun. Okay, take that thought and just breathe a little with that. Breathing in flower and sun and flower. And as you breathe a few breaths with the thinking around sunlight, radiant in the atmosphere, flowers opening, what is this interaction? You don't need your science. You may have it, which can be fun, but you don't need necessarily the science, just the sense of the relationship, and that the one thing becomes the other, and that the sun becomes the flower, and that the flower can't really be there without the sun. And the flower's ancestors can't be there without the sun. And so you enter into this sense of like the sun and the flower they are each other. Sunlight becomes the life of flower, transforms, is impermanent, and changes, becomes something new. And the experience of a flower receiving the sun seems like something outside of us in terms of concept. But there's another level of this, which is that we are very much like the flower. And although we might not transform the energy of the sun into our own energy in the same way as the flower, we are also made of sun. So we know very well what it's like to interbe with the sun. So it now is not an abstract exercise anymore, right? The sun and the flower are each other. And I also am a child of the sun. So I'm a sibling of the flower. And you begin to feel this. And if you give your thoughts time and space and heart space, right? Felt thoughts. If you give that space and that presence, realization begins to happen, meaning it becomes real. It's not just a concept anymore. You sense this relationship on a different dimension, a spiritual dimension of yourself. Your inner life is now filled with something, right? So you can do that in a few breaths with sunlight. You might take a few breaths with the cloud and the rain and the water, which is a part of the flower, a few breaths with the minerals in the soil, a few breaths with the gardener who cultivated this, or the Sangha friend who brought it to the retreat, and therefore you can have it in front of you, right? You can look into the flower and find all of these beautiful other beings. Usually we think of them as other things, but are actually in the flower and can't be separated from the flower. And that experience beneath the surface in us that wakes up when we contemplate like that allows us to touch something that is more truly the flower than just an idea of that's a flower. Tai would say you look deeply into the flower to see the non-flower elements, all the things which are not flower, which somehow are the flower. And there's math for this too, which is really fun. Any mathematicians here? Maybe, yeah? Okay, there's this equation. A is not A is A. See if we can make sense out of that one. This is the equation of deep looking and connecting us with our spiritual dimension. The flower is not really the flower. That's why, and because we know that, because we experience that, that's why it's truly a flower. That's why it is what it is. Right? I am not really me. And that's why I'm really me. It makes me me. Right? A does not equal A equals A. Right? We practiced this last night. You'll recognize this idea of deep looking, slow, breathing, feeling, letting these concepts take shape within us in the earth-touching practice. Right? And this is a way of contemplating ourselves. And I am not really me. I am generations of ancestors in a river of life. I'm like a drop in the river. Okay? Imagine that. Can you see a drop in the river? Really? River, where's the drop? You can't you can't decipher. You can't say where the drop is and where it isn't. This is a river. Right? But I'm a drop. The experience I have is as a drop in the river. This is very clear. Like, I'm sitting here looking at you, you're sitting there looking at me. Like, there's drop-like experience happening here. But when we look deeply, it's a river. And I am not really me. I am all of my ancestors. Land, familial, spiritual. I am all of them. And I'm all of my descendants through blood and also through the fruits of my actions, right? That's the contemplation of the earth touching. Yeah. So I'm not really me. But that gives me such a clear and deep sense of me. Yeah. But it's not the same thing. When you do this meditation and you talk to most people, that won't have any idea what you're talking about when you say me. But you know what you're talking about when you say me. Yeah. When you refer to yourself, you know very well that you're referring to all of your non-self elements too. But many people you speak with won't see that because they are still caught in the idea of a separate self, a separate being. Yeah. And this is a kind of an awakening to another dimension of ourselves. That's like the wave and the water is one of the favorite examples to use. And then with a wave, you see the surface of the water, it has waves on it, right? And there's a wave over here, and there's a wave over there, and there's one over here, and this one's taller, and this one's shorter, and this one has a crest, and this one's bald, right? And they're all different. Some are going up, and some are going down, and some are having fun, and some are smashing into each other, and right? There's a lot going on the surface of the water, but every wave is manifesting out of the ocean, the vastness of the ocean. Right? And you can't separate the surface from the depths, actually. Yeah. But if we're only perceiving ourselves on the surface, life can be very scary. If you're a wave and you think that you're just a wave, something's going on. Okay, you think that you're just a wave, and you look out in your world around you, surrounded by other waves who are just themselves. And then you look a little further out and, whoa, what's that? That's a rocky shore. And the tide is moving me. The wind is moving me. These conditions of life are moving me. And you suddenly feel helpless as you watch as row upon row, generation upon generation of waves in front of you are being smashed to little bits and pieces of water all over the place as they hit the rocky shore. And you're drawing closer and closer and closer to that doom. Right? It's terrifying. Yeah. I'm making light of it, but it's very real. It's very real. We can be very afraid when we are living only on the surface, when we only see beginnings and ends and ups and downs and rights and wrongs. But the ocean is not right or wrong in its depths. The ocean doesn't worry about going up and down, in or out, about its beginning or its end. It's so vast, and if you are a wave who also can touch your water, your waterness, the nature of the water, then as the shore approaches, you are not afraid, right? Because you are here, but you are also everywhere else. And you don't have this identity of like, this is just me and I began and now I'm going to end. You have looked beyond that and touched something far deeper. And that has become a lived experience inside of you. You feel it under the surface. You know it. This is what we're practicing. This is what we're practicing with all these little deep-looking meditations that we do. When you pick up that piece of food and you contemplate where it comes from and then you take it into your body, you're practicing, right? To not be a little self, but to be an interbeing, to interbe with the whole cosmos. When we practice breathing in and breathing out, and we calm our bodies down, it's lovely. But then we make a shift and we practice to think about the air that we're breathing in. Feel those molecules of air and oxygen becoming our blood. So a moment before what was the out-breath of our friends on the other side of the room is now the blood in our veins. This is true and real. Since we've been sitting in here, we're becoming each other. And that's happening. Like, I have your out-breath circulating through my body right now. This is not a me and you kind of thing. This is definitely a we, a togetherness kind of a thing. And when I practice to contemplate that, and I go wider and I remember all the trees and the green living things that are so wonderfully leaving behind an oxygen-rich atmosphere as they take carbon out. It's a wonderful gift. So like their out breath is the perfect in breath for me, for you, for us. So I breathe in the forest, and I breathe out for the forest. And if you breathe like that, it's a little bit different than if I'm saying breathing in, I'm aware of my body, breathing out, I calm my body. Now breathe in the forest, breathe out the forest. There's another feeling in there, another experience arising. And that's on the level of the ultimate dimension. That's on the level of your spiritual dimension. So we're cultivating this all day long in our practices. And it's so wonderful to have that refuge, to have that source of deep stability, deep knowing, so that when we go up, we're not so high on ourselves. And when we go down, we're not so afraid, right? Because going up and going down, of course, those are natural parts of the life of a wave, right? Being moved by the forces of the cosmos, it is natural and normal and out of our control, yeah, to some degree. And that we won't feel unsafe because of that, if we know our home, our true home. Not only does it provide that deep sense of safety and belonging and stability, it's also really lovely. There's so many beautiful, artful, enjoyable, and fun experiences that can emerge from touching life deeply. And we get to enjoy that. We get to live in that, and that becomes a source of happiness for us. Happiness is no longer like, oh, when I finish this degree, oh, when I make this much money and I have enough put away for such and such a thing, right? Happiness isn't when I know that my friend is going to be happy or whatever, and that's just going to make me happy. We're not on that level. Only happiness can be in the simplest thing, in a flower sitting on the table, or the whiskers of your cat, and to marvel at them. Yeah, see the world in a grain of sand, right? Life is so full of wonder. These teachings are not an escape from the deep and harsh sufferings of life. They are born from it. This was the refuge that Tai took in order to make it through hellfire. He took refuge in his practice and his understanding. Yeah. And going through those terrible, terrible experiences of war and violence made it very clear for him where his true happiness and his true strength would lie, where it comes from. Right? And so these practices like touching the earth and deep-looking meditations, these are coming from that. It's not to pretend like we have a happy-go-lucky, easy life and we just don't need to suffer anymore. Right? It's to help us hold the immensity of the world. And we'll talk about how this understanding living beings and their suffering now, right, can come from this kind of practice. As I said, first practice with flowers and cats and fun, easy things. But then when that capacity has grown, you can hold a powerful suffering and not be moved by it, not be destroyed by it, not be paralyzed by it, because you know your home, you know your source. You can look at the wave from the water. The middle way talks about these concepts, this way of deep looking, like this. This is because that is, and this is not because that is not. So simple. It's so simple. This is because that is, and this is not because that is not. For example, the nourishment and the healing that we experience on a retreat is because the Sangha has assembled. Because all of these wonderful people have decided to come together on retreat. So the Sangha has assembled, the Sangha is practicing, and therefore nourishment and healing like this are possible. And you can't take one out of the other. The sunshine and the flower. The flower is because the sunshine is. And if the sunshine is not, the flower cannot be there. Like that. Right and left. The right is the right because the left is the left. Who's thinking politics? I see that. It's a good thing to think about. It's a challenging thing to think about. The right is the right because the left is the left. And the right is not the right when the left is not the left. It's a little bit scary for those of us who have identified with certain ways of thinking and beliefs and groups and things like that. But this is very clear. Just like the sun and the flower, just like me and my grandmas, right? The right and the left. You look at the pen right here, it has for you, there's a right side and a left side. And you can't just take away one. If I take away, actually I think I could probably unscrew part of it. But if I could take away, I'm going to cover it. Is that your right? Yeah. If I take away your right, what happened? There's just another right. Yeah. If I take away the left, right? There's just another left and a right. They make each other. You can't have one without the other. And if I'm going to take away the right, I need also to take away the left. We enter our. There isn't a way to remove a condition that you would rather not have from life. Just get rid of it because we'd be better off without it. It doesn't work that way. We enter our. We can only transform and change the relationship of the conditions, but we can't take one away in order just to have the thing we want. There will always be another face of it on the surface, right? Only when we go into the ultimate dimension, when we drop below the surface, can we find that space. But when we do, we no longer are going to take a side versus another side, because we realize all those sides come from the same place. In Buddhism, the word karma, I should say in Buddhism, the word karma means action. We've been talking about action. Oh. It's pretty good. I've erased whiteboards before that didn't erase. And that's like, oh no, what have I done? Made something permanent. So the word karma means action. And in Buddhism, there's a way of understanding that, which is in the light of this is because that is, and this is not because that is not. So, action, our understanding coming forth as thoughts, as speech, as action, as choices in our life. Already here you see it. This is because that is, right? The work we have done in our life to cultivate our understanding is the basis for our action. So when you think of action and karma, we have to also consider that how we got to the action we're undertaking, right? So within action are the effects of the past actions. Okay? Now manifest, right? What we are experiencing right now and the activity we're in right now contains also the actions of the past. And the action of the present, that what we are manifesting now, is, it's so weird with the microphone, is the creation of future consequence. It's going to put something forward for what comes next. So inside all actions, we have all of this. Only we're usually only aware of what's going on right here, what the now the manifestation is right here, right now, and the decision, the choice that we're making, how we are going to think, speak, and act right now. But inside it is actually containing all of the past actions that have brought about what is currently there, and out of this, all of the future. So there's a consequence of the action here. The consequence of these is here, the consequence of that is there. Make sense? Very simple. So karma is not a tally. It's not a judgment. It's not a way of saying something is right or wrong, or something is good or bad. But we tend to talk about it like that. Bad karma, the idea of bad karma, really just means the accumulation of momentum of actions in the past that have a momentum and have accumulated to a point where they're sort of presetting the moment with unwholesomeness. with suffering, right? So it wouldn't be right for us to say, like, I just have bad karma, right? Or bad luck. No. Actions of the past have produced a certain result which has suffering in it. And that has a momentum, right? It's accumulated. It's moving. And so it's like pushing us in its own direction. And we talk about purifying karma in our practice, to purify our karma. That simply means, right, to add in this moment where we are alive, to add the best that we can. Our deepest understanding, our deepest love, our deepest compassion, our healing and transformation work, right? In order to change the direction of that momentum, to shift it in a new direction. Now, there is this funny expression which you come across when you study Buddhism, which is where karma has become complete. Yeah, I see some question marks on here. Where you've completed your karma. Yeah, I'm not. The Buddha supposedly completed the karmic cycle, right? I'm not sure that my mind can grasp in a simple way what that means. Because of the reality of interbeing. Yeah. And we see that expressed in Mahayana Buddhism with the idea of the bodhisattva. And the bodhisattva takes the long journey of the practice to cross the ocean of suffering. They go to the heart of reality. But they don't stay there once they got there. This is the image. They come back out in order to be present, because they recognize that true awakening is not possible on an individual level. True awakening is a collective endeavor, right? So I bring my awakening into the mix, but I don't just stop in my own, right? I'm on my path to get my own attainment, right? That doesn't fit with our observation of reality. So completed karma is a mystery to me right now. Maybe next year I'll have some different ideas about it. I want to, I know this is a little bit of theory in the middle of a Dharma talk, but I like having structural references for my practice. It helps me stay grounded sometimes. So there's a way in which all of this manifests. So we got the basic model here. This is what's happening. So the manifestation, and here I'm really talking about action, right? The manifestation of our actions, the context. What does it look like? Where is it happening? And there's been a development for me that has been really helpful, which is to see that because this picture is so big, my present moment experience, what is now manifest, contains all this stuff in the past, right? It's got everything that my family has gone through. It's got everything that society is going through. It's got the whole evolution of the cosmos in it. Oh, it's so big, right? So you're walking through your daily life with all of that, right? It's very complicated. And you're going to try to navigate in your relationships with everybody else. And like, I have all these preferences and these sufferings and that, and another person has different ones. And it's actually really complex. In the last 30 or 30 years or so, I think there's been a big shift in people's awareness of this sort of thing, collectively, globally. So we are now talking about those shared stories in a way that we never talked about them before. We often talk about them in terms of the injustice or the suffering, but really underneath that, we're starting to acknowledge that my happiness isn't separate from the happiness of other people, groups of people, and histories of different peoples and how they've interacted, and the same with my suffering. And we're talking about that on a big level in a way that hasn't been done. It's really kind of cool to see. So, in my daily life, things manifest on an individual level, on a relational level, meaning like with the one or two people that are nearby, right? Your most loved ones, or the people you spend the most time with, right? On a collective level, I want to make sure I got my words right here. Yeah. Generational level, and we're going to add one at the end. And this is also expressed, see it in the mindfulness trainings. I will do this for myself, my family, my society, and the world, right? But in here we also have the observation of the past. So the presence of our past experiences of our ancestors and those who we are working with, their ancestors. But this is really important for me. And this is important for me because of suffering. If we were only talking about happy things, no problem. But when we talk about suffering, I need to understand what and where I'm relating to in this way. Is this situation, is this something that I'm experiencing in myself as more or less an individual, and on an individual level, right? Now I can look deeply into myself as an individual and find the collective and find past generations. But today, I'm feeling it, right? I'm experiencing this. I'm not back in the past, in my grandfather's war trauma. I'm not there. I'm here, stuck with a strictness at the table manners that makes me want to shout at my kids because they're chewing with their mouth open. Right? They're connected. Right? And if I understand that, and I have a practice to take care of my grandfather's war trauma, right? Then I don't have to express it at the dining room table, right? It's not going to matter. I have a way to handle that on one level, and how it shows up for me, right? I need to realize that I'm working with my children in that moment, and strong feelings I have, and right. Maybe you have a friend who's involved in social justice work, and they are really emphatic and really wrapped up in it, and you are too to some extent, but then you realize you have different views around certain aspects of it, or different approaches. You're trying to solve these issues out here, which are huge and collective, and have been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years in your personal relationship, right? Deal with it as a personal relationship. Deal with what it actually means, right? You see what I mean? Like if I'm experiencing frustration in this conversation, I got to work with that. And you're touching my seed of fear. Okay, we need to work with that. But I'm not going to blame your ancestors for this. and hold you accountable for that, the fear that I feel right now because your ancestors caused this huge trauma in the world, right? That doesn't make any sense. It's manifesting right here and right now in me and in our relationship as we're talking, so we can talk about it on those terms. Like, I'm feeling hurt. Okay, let's work on that. I'm feeling afraid. Let's work on that. And I work on it in my own meditation practice, and I work on it in my communication. Boom, boom. And, and onwards. So it's really helpful to understand that karma manifests on all these levels, all the time. But where are we practicing with it and how? Right? And I'm more and more convinced that the real work of transformation that we can do as practitioners of understanding and compassion is in this space. Right? Here, in my own meditation practice, and here on my interrelational practice. Because this is really how it's showing up. Once I start hypothesizing about the big issues in the world, I'm a little bit removed from what I'm actually experiencing in the moment, in myself and with you, right? So I'm more and more convinced that these small things in our lives are actually the most important ones. When you have frustrations with your Sangha sisters and brothers over their habit energies and the way they organize things, right? That right there, that's how you are solving those big problems. Right? Because if we don't do that, what are we bringing to the big problem? Right? We're just bringing our frustrations and our unsolved sufferings, our unembraced feelings, we project it outwards. So the real work is the small work. And when I think of incredible beings that I've met or learned about in my life, Fern and I once did a retreat. It was very small, where the whole thing was about studying bodhisattvas, real life bodhisattvas, people who were amazing, and just taking time to dive into their stories and stuff. But when you get close to someone who has accomplished something really amazing in the world, you see something different than when you study someone from afar. I look at the life of Gandhi, I might even look at the life of Thai, and I see a bodhisattva in the world. I see someone who has transformed something really important and powerful in the world, has brought about a marvelous inspiration and change. But the truth is, and I know this because I lived with one of them, that great being never did anything more than make one step at a time. In their daily life, right? They weren't like, I am shifting the machinations of the collective and I'm doing all this. They were listening deeply to someone's suffering and offering comfort and understanding. They were walking peacefully and beautifully and carefully through each moment that they could. They were bringing strength and clarity and truth and a voice for truth where they could. But they were doing it one sentence at a time, one step at a time, in those little things. And that's the accumulation that then transforms over time. So the skills that we learn around how to handle a difficult mental formation, meaning a seed of suffering, when it arises, and how we take care of that, these skills are paramount They're not baby stuff. They're not just for me and for my own ease and well-being. This is the basis of how we then embrace a seed of suffering which manifests between you and me, that we could both contributed to triggering, to watering, right? And my ability to handle it in myself is hugely relevant to my ability to handle it with you. Right? And if we can do that, right, and maybe a smaller group can create a different kind of space which can hold a shared issue. And I've been a part of so many circles where we've held really difficult sufferings. And because of this practice right here in my heart, and the practice that I do with you in the listening in that moment, and then in the circle that's happening, right? All these lines of connection and practice are happening. Then we suddenly have a radiance of awakening, a radiance of compassion in the world, in that circle. And it's exponentially more powerful when there's a group of people holding that. Yeah. So I never feel like coming on a retreat like this is self-indulgent. I never feel like I am wasting my time and privilege, right? Because I know that I'm applying myself to learn these skills which help me to transform in the present moment all that transmission of the past and bring to my individual and relational and group experiences, to bring to that my real stability and my real understanding and love. So, back to the homework. If you happen to have taken some time and to reflect on the seeds in your consciousness which have been prominent lately, and made a list of wholesome and unwholesome, you can take that and just read it a few times and really look, are there patterns here? And there's one thing I didn't share so specifically on, which is when you reflect back, you're really scanning back in time. It's like, okay, it's 6 p.m. now. Let me go back. An hour ago, where was I? What was I feeling? Okay, boom, write that down. 2 hours ago, and you go back across the day and you put these things in, and if you put down, I was really anxious at 5 o'clock when XYZ was happening, right? So I can't say that up here. Those are like the names of your airports. When you've written your anxiety there, and then you also go back and at 10 a.m. you also were anxious, write it twice, 3, 4, 5, as many times as it appeared in that last day or two, because that's going to show you how prominent it is, right? So then you have in front of you a list of different seeds in your consciousness that you qualify at this time as being unwholesome, meaning they hurt, they're not helping you, they're overwhelming you, or so on and so on, right? And you have gotten that by looking at your daily life to see what was happening that touched those seeds. So in that reflective exercise, you should have, if you reread and rethink about these things, you should have some insight growing as to what you have been doing and what you have not been doing, which has been watering these seeds. And the same on the other side. And then you get to decide which one you want to take really special care of, or two, but maybe just one or two. That's all you need. To take some time when you're sitting quiet, when you're walking, to bring up that energy of anxiety or fear or anger. You bring it up, the one that you've chosen, and you walk with it, and you spend time with it to help bring together, as I was saying yesterday, this in the embracing meditation, you bring together your loving kindness and the suffering. You bring together the spaciousness and the calm and the suffering. You bring together this deep listening experience, listening to yourself with the suffering. And then you can do exactly what we did with the flower. My dear suffering, where have you come from? What are you made of? How have you come to be? And you're going to see this picture. You're going to see things that you're doing in your daily life that are watering that seed that you've chosen and decided to do. You're going to see things that are happening in relationships that you're in, and you're going to see stories of past generations and people around you and society, influences, so many conditions that are coming together to build this. But remember, this is the place where you have the biggest, most direct effect. And one of the ways that you have the biggest and most direct effect is that a seed in the consciousness is watered simply by being there. The more time you give it, right, to do its own thing, the stronger it gets. It's like it's working out, right? And the more it's doing that, the stronger it's going to get. So this is the other image that I had up there. When you're just even telling yourself the story over and over again of the suffering, you're rehearsing it, and it's growing. We are creatures of habit and pattern. And if you set those patterns up, they just run, right? So we change the thinking itself. And that's what this meditation is about. I'm saying, I'm not going to follow my suffering. I'm going to hold it with thoughts of rest, with kindness, with peace, with invitations for understanding and compassion. I embrace it with that. And so you've interrupted the cycle of watering it by just rehearsing it. You stopped rehearsing it, and now you're adding these other ingredients. And out of that emerges the deep understanding. Where do you come from? What are you made of? And it gets very practical. The things you've been reading, the foods you've been eating. Yes, the foods that you've been eating can have effects on your mental states, right? And the conversations you've been having, and like I was just saying, the way you've been thinking about it can be a food. And like, if I've been thinking about this all the time, I have to stop thinking about it. I have to slow it down. How do I do that? Right? Well, how do I stop watering that? You got to find new stories to tell yourself. The simplest way that I know to reset on a daily basis for basic health and well-being is to read something. So it's not very hard to get a small library, or just borrow a book if you need to, of spiritual text, of and almost every one of Thich Nhat Hanh's books would work, right? Or spiritual text, or illuminated poetry which really comes from deep looking and inspiration and spiritual experience. And you have it by your bed, right? And before you lie down, you sit on your bed and you open that book. And you're going to not tell yourself your daily habit energy right now. You're going to read something and let that thought direct the feeding in your consciousness. And you wake up in the morning and you do the same thing, right? The gathas that are posted around here on the retreat, this is how the novitiates practice this all day long. They recite these poems over and over again for going to the bathroom, for taking a shower, for putting on their clothes. And now they've been developed for phones and computers and driving and all that kind of stuff. So you have these resources for resetting. And they're very basic and very simple, but we have to do them, right? So when you've done this inventory exercise, you'll see where you are. And then you get to start practicing directly in relationship to the seeds of suffering and water the seeds of joy, right? And by that I mean, looking at your list of wholesome seeds, there are some things that are going well, keep doing them, right? And there are other seeds that maybe you feel like you're missing there. Yeah. I see some in my life. They're amusing me right now because I'm really dancing around them. not going in. There are some possibilities for real nourishment, but we haven't put the time in. We haven't decided that that's really important. That's what this exercise is about. It's about checking in with yourself to see what is really important to me right now. What is manifesting for me right now that needs care, that could enliven and enlighten me. Yeah. So, dear friends, please continue to practice on both the relative and the ultimate dimension. The relative dimension is the dimension of the waves. The ultimate dimension is the dimension of the water. On the relative dimension, I breathe in and out to calm myself, to collect myself into the moment. And on the ultimate dimension, I breathe with the air, right? And the forest, and all the living beings who I share this moment with, right? On the relative dimension, I eat the food, aware of the taste, the flavor, and the movement, and the chewing, and the swallowing, and really present in that. Relaxing and calming and finding, nutrition happening in that way by eating. And I practice that. But on the ultimate dimension is when I practice to look deeply into that food that I'm eating. And I open to the spiritual dimension, which is present in the carrot or the tofu or the rice or the tomato. And I really go deeply into that space and allow myself to be connected in that way. The relative dimension is when you practice walking meditation and you're putting your feet on the ground and you're enjoying the sunshine on your cheek and the fresh air in your nostrils and the relaxation in your body. That's the relative dimension of the practice of walking. And then when you invite your mother to walk with you, to have these steps of peace that she may not have ever really had. When you invite your father to walk with you, to know what it's like to feel easy and not pressured and not always have to succeed and strive so hard, right? And you invite them to walk with you in peace and in freedom. Now you've opened yourself to the ultimate dimension, and they walk in your footsteps with you, right? You see the layers of the practice here. Both are wonderful, and we need to do both, right? When we listen to each other, in Dharma sharing or in another moment, and I listen to your words, I listen to what you're saying and the story, the joy, the happiness, and the sorrow that might be there on the relative dimension. And then I can also soften here and listen from the heart. And so much more is revealed. Not with my ideas processing what you're saying, but with my heart opening to the deep sense of who you are underneath that and all of that interbeing that's being expressed. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day of practice. Can we have the bell?